All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're tackling one of the fiercest and, frankly, most expensive debates in the entire gaming hardware space. It's an argument that totally dominates forums and drives a multi-billion-dollar tech industry.
We've all been there, right? You miss a crucial shot, and instantly it's the monitor's fault. We all want to know if dropping serious cash on premium monitors will instantly boost our gaming performance, or if it's kind of just a marketing myth. If you've ever felt like your hardware is the only thing holding you back from winning, well, you are definitely not alone.
Gamers are constantly upgrading, right? We're throwing money at powerful CPUs like an Intel Core i9, heavy-duty NVIDIA RTX graphics cards, and these incredibly lightning-fast monitors, all in the pursuit of a competitive edge. The industry tells us that upgrading to displays capable of 144 or even 240 frames per second is the absolute key to unlocking our true potential. But is it? Like, what does the actual science have to say about this?
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll quickly cover the frame rate hype, FPS versus refresh rate, the science of shooting, the 30 Hz trap, and finally, the final verdict. Okay, part 1, the frame rate hype. Let's look at what the industry actually tells us we need. It's actually wild how these standard recommendations drastically jump around. For movies, a simple 24 FPS gives us that classic cinematic feel. For most casual, everyday gaming, 60 FPS is considered perfectly fluid. But the second you step into competitive titles like Valorant or Call of Duty, the industry recommendation absolutely rockets up to 120 or even 240 FPS. The claim here is that it drastically reduces input lag and enhances your reaction speed. Moving on to part 2, FPS versus refresh rate. We really need to clear up some major confusion here before we go any further. First off, let's talk about FPS. This is basically a measure of what your computer's internal hardware is actively producing. Specifically, it's how many times your graphics card can draw a brand new image every single second. Now, this brilliantly illustrates the bottleneck that so many gamers completely ignore. FPS is generated by your system, but Hertz, or HEZ, is determined entirely by your monitor. Hertz measures how many times the physical screen can update per second. This means, practically speaking, that even if your massive high-end graphics card is pumping out 120 FPS, a standard 60 Hz monitor can still only physically show you 60 of those frames. You need both to be in perfect sync to get the benefit. But wait, there is a third bottleneck here, and it's literally your own biology. While competitive gamers swear by the absolute highest numbers possible, human biology dictates that for most everyday users, visual benefits heavily plateau once you get past 120 frames per second. Yes, sure, most people can detect differences in fast-paced environments up to about 200 FPS, but beyond 120, the visual improvements become incredibly marginal for the average human eye. Which brings us to part 3, the science of shooting, featuring some genuinely fascinating research out of the University of Florida. To actually figure this out empirically, researchers set up an incredibly strict blind experiment. They took 26 average gamers, these were folks ranging in age from 22 to 31, and sat them at a high-end Alienware laptop with an Intel i9 processor and an RTX 4060 graphics card. By keeping absolutely everything, the hardware, the seat, the mouse, even the mouse pad, totally identical across all tests, they isolated the one single variable that mattered, the monitor's refresh rate. Participants were tasked with a very intense 1-minute shooting drill on a sterile, custom, first-person shooter platform. This was designed strictly to test targeting speed and accuracy. They basically had to quickly aim and fire at targets popping up on the screen in a highly controlled environment. The absolute genius of this setup was the blindness. Researchers randomly changed the monitor's refresh rate between 5 different settings: 30, 60, 120, 144, and 240 Hz. Without telling the players at all, testing pure, uninfluenced performance. They gave the players a few practice rounds to stabilize their learning curve and then sent them in completely blind to the hardware settings. They meticulously measured objective data, like score and accuracy, right alongside a subjective self-rating of how successful the players actually felt they were doing. All right, part 4, the 30 Hz trap. After running the numbers through rigorous statistical analysis to find the true differences between the groups, the data revealed a very surprising reality about our gaming hardware. When you look at how the scores plot out, it's pretty shocking how they just flatten out immensely as the refresh rate climbs past 60 Hz. At 30 Hz, scores are noticeably lower and tightly compressed. But if you look at the median scores, that horizontal line right in the middle of each data cluster, they are almost identical across 60, 120, 144, and 240 Hz.
In fact, the only statistically significant drop in gaming performance happened at exactly 30 Hz. Deeper analysis of this data revealed that the difference between playing at 60 Hz and 240 Hz was completely negligible for these players' actual, recorded scores.
So, this study concluded something that hardware companies probably don't want you to hear. While going from 30 to 60 Hz is a massive, highly noticeable upgrade for your score, going from 60 to 240 Hz provides zero significant performance benefit for the average player. Just let that sink in for a second. All the marketing pushing us toward 240 Hz monitors to instantly improve our aim, it simply doesn't hold up in a blind test for the average gamer.
Finally, part 5, the final verdict. What does all this mean for where you should actually spend your cash? Look, a 240 Hz monitor will absolutely give you a beautifully smooth visual experience. It reduces screen tearing and makes motion look incredibly butter smooth. But here's the hard truth. It won't magically make you a better shot if you're an average gamer. If you were stuck on 30 Hz, yes, you absolutely need to upgrade to 60 Hz, but anything beyond that, you are buying visual luxury, not a competitive advantage. I really hate to say it, but you just can't buy raw skill. So the next time you're tempted by a shiny, insanely expensive 240 Hz gaming monitor, you really have to ask yourself, are you actually buying a competitive edge, or are you just paying for a prettier picture? Upgrade your gear if you're stuck in the past, for sure. But remember, the ultimate hardware bottleneck might actually just be you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll catch you in the next one.